Protect yourself against the satanic science of energy blockages with the Energy Enhancement Streaming Video Meditation course. Inoculate yourself against globalism by downloading Energy Enhancement Books, Against Satanism in 4 volumes by Satchidanand. British destruction of France with its created French Revolution and Jacobins, commanded by Palmerston, Necker, Bentham, Mazzini, and Masonry. British superagent Marx creation of communism in London overturning and degenerating Russia with Jacobin Bolsheviks and agents Lenin and Stalin, 60 millions murdered, and China with superagent Mao, 100 millions murdered. Satanic Karl Marx was a British agent and the communist takeovers of Russia by the Bolsheviks and British agents Lenin and Stalin and China by the Red Guards and satanic 33rd degree Freemason, Yale-educated Mao. Killed 160 million people in the 20th century. Thus communism, socialism, and fascism are movements created by the oligarchic elite to enslave the world. Currently the attack on free speech is moving into a new phase. Alex Jones, China controls Apple. Apple has totally moved to China. Google is moving to China. Twitter, Microsoft for global censorship and 93% shadow bans. Chinese communism has moved on to fascism like Hitler's National Socialist, Nazi movement, also moved on to fascism, satanic globalism, Chinese social score to control dissent worldwide, a document registration to get on the internet, an execution organ harvesting vans in every city for being a Buddhist, a Christian, Falun Gong, or dissent. We have been sold off. All of Alex Jones' videos have now been censored by Google's YouTube, Apple, iTunes, Spotify, MailChimp, and Periscope and 50 more sites all on the same day. Next comes the payment processors and the banks. A British Royal Commission developed this plan in the 1920s. The Anglo-US Empire fusion. Transylvanian British monarchy took out their German cousins WW1 and Russian cousins in the Bolshevik Revolution in 1918. The plan of the Council of Foreign Relations, the CIA, and David Rockefeller for 70 years has been Muslims allied with socialist communist allied with communist/fascist, the government controls all industry, China. Their plan was to put in Mao, kill 100 million Chinese, move USA factories to China to use slave factories to elevate China, and use China to take over the world. Communism/fascism has no middle class, billionaires, and slaves only. Castrate, sterilize, and autistically brain damage the world with chemicals in the air, water, food and vaccines. Take over Europe and US with Muslim migrants allied with socialist communists. Macron in his recent speech said there would be 300 million migrants to Europe in the next 10 years. Apple has moved to China, its cloud keys handed over to the Chinese government. Google with its global censorship algorithms is moving to China, also taken over by the Chinese government. China has taken over all USA universities and all media, newspapers, television, Hollywood bought by China, through 15,000 shell companies. China given Panama Canal, deep water ports, rare earth minerals. Chinese/Google internet censorship worldwide and bring in worldwide social scoring, the mark of the beast to control all humanity for all time. Yet throughout history, from much before the Babylonian Empire, satanic psychopathic religions and myths, the 10 myths which control the world, have been specifically created to maintain oligarchic satanic control of society. To exacerbate implant addiction blockages of sex, drugs, and rock and roll through ritual sex, ritual drugs and religious music in order to divert, pervert and degenerate humanity in order to rule them. To that we must add the satanic psychopathic managers who maintain control of the world for the Luciferian psychopathic elite. Satanic controller of the British Empire, Henry Temple, the 3rd Viscount Palmerston. Palmerston is the man the others, the Russells, Disraelis, and Gladstones simply cannot match. Palmerston was first a Tory, then a Whig, always a disciple of satanic psychopathic Jeremy Bentham, head of British Secret Services Intelligence, and for 35 years there is scarcely a cabinet without Palmerston as Foreign Secretary or Prime Minister. In London they call him Lord Cupid, a Regency buck always on the lookout for a new mistress, perfectly at home in a ménage à trois. On the continent they call him Lord Firebrand. The schoolboys of Vienna sing that if the devil has a son, that son is Lord Palmerston. Bisexual Pam is an occultist who loves Satanism, seances, and ménages à trois. And here, between Big Ben and the Foreign Office, are the haunts of this 19th-century devil, head of the satanic psychopathic oligarchy, the new Venetian venal doge, Lord Palmerston. Old Pam. Pam is a woman's name and thus a homosexual reference, as is Napoleon III as Palmerston's catamite, below. Whilst not saying that all homosexuals are satanic, homosexuality and hypersexuality including pedophilia are practices which follow Satanism and the satanic empires like a disease. Satanist and psychopath Viscount Palmerston. I am now standing in the shadow of the Houses of Parliament in the part of London called Westminster. It is the year of grace 1850. Around me lies Victorian London, the London of Dickens and Thackeray, of John Stuart Mill and Thomas Carlyle. This capital city is now the center of the greatest colonial empire the world has ever known, shortly to embrace between 1/5 and 1/4 of the total population and land area of the earth. Although in theory there are still empires ruled by the French, the Spanish, the Portuguese, the Dutch, the Belgians, and the Danes, all of these, in this year of 1850, are but the satellites of the British Empire. Britain is the mistress of the seas, the empire upon which the sun never sets. It is the new Rome on the banks of the Thames. The Empress is Queen Victoria, who is largely occupied with Prince Albert in her business of breeding new litters of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha to take over the royal houses of Europe. A quarter century from now Victoria will be made Empress of India to reward her for so much breeding. But for all of Victoria's wealth and power, Britain is not really a monarchy, it is an oligarchy on the satanic psychopathic Venetian model, and the most powerful leader, the Doge of the British oligarchy in these times, between 1830 and the end of the American Civil War, is Lord Palmerston. A new satanic psychopathic Roman Empire. It is 1850. Lord Palmerston is engaged in a campaign to make London the undisputed center of a new, worldwide Roman Empire. He is attempting to conquer the world in the way that the British have already conquered India, destabilizing every other nation to the role of a puppet, client, and fall guy for British imperial policy. Lord Palmerston's campaign is not a secret. He has declared it here in the Houses of Parliament, saying that wherever in the world a British subject goes, he can flaunt the laws, secure that the British fleet will support him. Civis Romanus sum, every Briton is a citizen of this new Rome, thundered Lord Palmerston, and with that, the Universal Empire was proclaimed. During the British-created Napoleonic Wars, because British Masonic agents started the French Revolution, head of the British Secret Services, Jeremy Bentham, was writing the speeches of Robespierre from London, and like Hitler, the British Secret Service chose Napoleon to start the Napoleonic Wars to destroy and destabilize Europe and Russia, destroying infrastructure, creating poverty, whilst the British Empire managed to conquer most of the world outside of Europe, with the exception of the United States. After 1815, the French betrayed. The restored Bourbons, Orleanists, or Bonapartists were generally British agents, pliant tools of London. But in Central and Eastern Europe, there was Prince Metternich's Austrian Empire, a very strong land power. There was vast imperial Russia, under the autocrat Nicholas I or the reformer Alexander II. There was the Kingdom of Prussia. Lord Palmerston likes to call these the arbitrary powers. Above all, Palmerston baited Metternich, the embodiment and ideologue of the Congress of Vienna system. Metternich presided over one of the most pervasive police states in history. Men said his rule was shored up by a standing army of soldiers, a sitting army of bureaucrats, a kneeling army of priests, and a creeping army of informers. For Britain to rule the world, the Holy Alliance of Austria, Russia, and Prussia had to be broken up. There is also the matter of the British dismemberment of the Ottoman Empire, putting in British agent Kemal Ataturk, allowing him to win at Gallipoli, as Turkish head. Starting with British agent Lord Byron's Greek Revolution in the 1820s, British policy has been to play the card of nationalism, national liberation, against each of these rival empires. The imperial theme was sounded in 1846 with the free, slave and drugs, trade policy, Britain's declaration of intent to loot the world in the name of the pound. Then, in January 1848, Lord Palmerston arranged an insurrection in Sicily, using British mafia networks that went back to Lord Nelson. Satanist and head of MI6, Jeremy Bentham, creator of the all-seeing eye, wreathed in flame, panopticon prism, had himself stuffed with his head underneath him and placed in his favorite pub in London where it resides today. Here is the picture. In his exposition of the Bentham, hedonistic calculus, Bentham proposed a classification of 12 pains and 14 pleasures, by which we might test the happiness factor of any action. Nonetheless, it should not be overlooked that Bentham's hedonistic theory is often criticized. Bentham said it would be acceptable to torture one person if this would produce an amount of happiness in other people outweighing the unhappiness of the tortured individual, which has recently, satanically, been implemented by the USA. Bentham also argued for free banking, increases in interest rates to infinity and free love, the liberalization of laws prohibiting homosexual sex, bestiality, and pederasty. This is Satanism and the satanic perversion of the word, free. British agent Mazzini created young nationalist terrorist organizations to destabilize every country for divide and conquer. Satanic psychopathic principle of poverty destruction. Ambassador Urquhart controlled Marx for MI6. British agent Napoleon III spent time in his office at the British National Library talking to Palmerston. British agent and propagandist Karl Marx spent time in his office at the British National Library talking to Urquhart whilst writing Das Kapital, created to destabilize and destroy Russia and any other country targeted for destruction. The only way to reach the stars is to aim for the stars. Satchidanand. The agricultural revolution took thousands of years, the industrial revolution took hundreds of years, the technological revolution took tens, the spiritual revolution has come and we have only an instant to act. Russell Brand. You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. Richard Buckminster Fuller associated Lincoln used the credit system when he created government-issued money, greenbacks. Assassinated Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal economics when he demanded that the Rothschild privately owned Federal Reserve create trillions of dollars of credit to build the infrastructure which made the people of America the richest population in the world for 60 years. Following the techniques of FDR shows the way out of the purposeful oligarch austerity depression designed to dumb down humanity, create universal poverty and rule the world. Assassinated John F. Kennedy made government created greenbacks too. By 1980 he planned to have fusion power online and nuclear rockets for Mars and all the necessary commodities available from the asteroid belt. His plan was for more water, irrigation infrastructure to triple the agriculture of the United States and throughout the world for increased richness, cheaper power, a more richer, more numerous, more evolved humanity. Ban Fed TARP to banks, get rid of derivatives, use Fed credit to create trillions to rebuild world and U.S. infrastructure, increase high-flux density energy production, industry, and agriculture, the program to end the economic depression and thus help in the worldwide evolution of a rich humanity. We must understand that a collaboration of government and international companies is the definition of fascism. We must understand that any money paid to politicians is a bribe. Like judges, they must only be able to take money and advertising from their employers, all the people. We must understand that media cannot be under the total control of only 5 international companies. Politicians must only work to enrich their employers, all the people. Water, food, housing, education, libraries, transportation, energy, no pollution. All free and paid for by dirigist policies which make society rich and evolve individuals, and take humanity to the stars. 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 Russell Brand says, like most people I regard politicians as frauds and liars and the current political system as nothing more than a bureaucratic means for furthering the augmentation and advantages of economic elites. They are all run by the Luciferian elite. The Democratic left is no better than the Democratic right. Tony Blair and Ed Miliband are as great a menace as David Cameron. Obama is the same as the Tea Party. Instead of corrupt Democratic leaders, Russell Brand wants a total revolution of consciousness and our entire social, political and economic system to stop the despoliation of the planet and allow the redistribution of wealth. In the Gladiator movie by Ridley Scott we have a glimpse of the technique being presently used by the Luciferian elite. Commodus walks around Falco, I have been told of a certain sea snake which has a very unusual method of attracting its prey. It will lie at the bottom of the ocean as if wounded. Then its enemies will approach, and yet it will lie quite still. And then its enemies will take little bites of it, and yet it remains still. Commodus, so, we will lie still, and let our enemies come to us and nibble. Have every senator followed. But this conspiracy goes deeper than that of psychopath Commodus. I doubt that Lyndon LaRouche, Alex Jones, Marie Le Pen, Nigel Farage, Lord Monckton, David Icke, David Coleman are sincere. All of them are Illuminati agents. All of them use the truth to create opposition and revolution to bring in a fascist dictator. All of them are agents of the Luciferian elite. Russell Brand is a useful idiot, probably a spare. As one American general asked of Alex Jones, "Who do you work for?" Well, Alex Jones works for Ron Paul, a libertarian and constitutionalist. Yet we have a glimpse of Ron Paul when we see he supported warmonger and fascist Mitt Romney in the 2008 election. When we see he is in favor of, even proposed in the first place, a cutting of food stamps, to push the poorest people in America towards a fascist policy of hunger, starvation, genocide. Lyndon LaRouche has developed the best private intelligence agency in the world, and his analysis tells the truth, yet most people say that his organization is authoritarian and that he is a fascist. This technique was used before when the CIA funded the terrorist groups in Argentina to fight against the generals who had usurped the country. This resulted in the bringing in of the 1970s police state, where all the terrorists and many political enemies, 40,000 of them, were starved, arrested, tortured, and thrown out of aeroplanes over the Atlantic Ocean. And again when authoritarian dictator Stalin, following closely on British agent Lenin, who used Marxism created by British intelligence Urquhart Marx, who was given an office in the British National Library in order to write Das Kapital in order to stir up the natives to bring in their own dictator of death. To reduce Russian consciousness, 60 million of Russians were arrested, tortured, gulagged, incinerated. And again when intelligence created Marxism was used to install 33rd degree Freemason Mao in charge of China. To reduce Chinese consciousness, 80 million of people were starved, arrested, tortured, gulagged, incinerated, and the authoritarian police state created slaves to work in the Chinese apple factories surrounded by suicide nets. Well, if they all work for the intelligence services, then nothing less than the truth will do in order to create a revolution to destroy the American Republic and bring in a new fascist Hitler. And this has to be the most important question, because for thousands of years, demagogues paid by elite Satanists have spoken 90% truth, conspiracy theories, to manage the human herd, to trick the nascent leaders of society and channel them into a martyr's death or support for psychopathic fascist totalitarian authoritarians like Julius Caesar, Alexander the Great, Lenin, Stalin, Hitler, Pol Pot, and Mao. People responsible for the greatest genocides in history. Even the sincere yet naive are used to promote the fascist supermarket. Russell Brand is as sincere as Miley Cyrus. Russell Brand says, "Like most people, I regard politicians as frauds and liars and the current political system as nothing more than a bureaucratic means for furthering the augmentation and advantages of economic elites." Yet he writes as if he is a child, born after the millennium, who can behave as if we never lived through the 20th century. He does not know what happened when men, burning with zealous outrage over the false flag burning of the Reichstag, accomplished by Hitler himself and blamed on the communists, cui bono? Who benefits? Created states with total control of consciousness and the entire social, political and economic system, and does not want to know either. Which is not to say that Brand and the rest are just fools, or that people who watch him in their millions are just enjoying a celebrity tantrum. Now, as in the 1920s and 1930s, many inhabitants of most European countries agree with Brand's slogans that all politicians are crooks and democracy is a sham. Today's crisis has left Europe in a pre-revolutionary situation. Or, if that is going too far, you can at least say that Europe looks ready for radical political change. Unfortunately for Brand, who sees himself a radical leftist of some sort, apparently, the greatest beneficiary of the nihilism he promotes is the radical right. Many people are surprised that the right-wing and neo-fascist movements have benefited most from a banking crash brought by the most overpaid people on the planet. I have to confess to being shocked as well. But I should not be, and nor should you. Classic fascism movements borrowed from the left, and today's neo- or post-fascist movements follow suit. Mussolini emphasized that fascism was a third way between capitalism and socialism. Today Marie Le Pen can say that the Front National has downplayed its racism and homophobia, is the enemy of unregulated markets and a supporter of state intervention to protect French interests. As important as its cross-class appeal is that the far right has a program. It may be a wicked and illusory program, but proposals to stop immigration and tackle the disastrous Euro experiment make sense too in hard times. The far left, by contrast, has nothing. It cannot say what alternative it has to mainstream social democracy, as Brand's slack-jawed inability to answer simple questions showed. In any case, the similarities between far left and far right are more striking than their differences. Brand made this point for me too when he held up the death cults of ultra-reactionary religious fundamentalists as examples to emulate rather than the enemies to fight. There is no need to take on the arguments of Russell Brand or Lyndon LaRouche, Alex Jones, Marie Le Pen, Nigel Farage, Lord Monckton, David Icke, or David Coleman. In general, they are telling the truth. What needs to be developed is, rather than open revolt, we need to develop a new solution. To defeat the Luciferian elite who have managed the human herd since the slave trading, drug-running Babylon, through the slave trading, drug-running Roman Empire, past the slave trading, drug-running Venetians, and the slave trading, drug-running British Empire, and on into the slave trading, drug-running Anglo-American establishment who rule through the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and the IMF, International Military Force of Drug-Running, White Slave Trading NATO, the CFR, the Bilderbergers, Davos, TED, RIIA, British Royal Institute of International Affairs, the Rockefeller CFR, Council of Foreign Affairs. To defeat the Luciferian elite we need a spiritual revolution. The agricultural revolution took thousands of years, the industrial revolution took hundreds of years, the technological revolution took tens, the spiritual revolution has come and we have only an instant to act. Russell Brand, you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. Richard Buckminster Fuller assassinated Lincoln, used the credit system when he created government-issued money, greenbacks. Assassinated Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal economics when he demanded that the Rothschild privately owned Federal Reserve create trillions of dollars of credit to build the infrastructure which made the people of America the richest population in the world for 60 years. Following the techniques of FDR shows the way out of the purposeful oligarch austerity depression designed to dumb down humanity, create universal poverty and rule the world. Assassinated John F. Kennedy made government-created greenbacks too. By 1980 he planned to have fusion power online and nuclear rockets for Mars and all the necessary commodities available from the asteroid belt. His plan was for more water, irrigation infrastructure to triple the agriculture of the United States and throughout the world for increased richness, cheaper power, a more richer, more numerous, more evolved humanity. Ban Fed TARP to banks, get rid of derivatives, use Fed credit to create trillions to rebuild world and U.S. infrastructure, increase high-flux density energy production, industry, and agriculture, the program to end the economic depression and thus help in the worldwide evolution of a rich humanity. We must understand that any money paid to politicians is a bribe. Like judges, they must only be able to take money and advertising from their employers, all the people. We must understand that media cannot be under the total control of only 5 international companies. Politicians must only work to enrich their employers, all the people. Water, food, housing, education, libraries, energy, no pollution. All free and paid for by dirigist policies which make society rich and take humanity to the stars. A return to Palmerston. Lord Palmerston's 3 leading satanic psychopathic British agents who enabled British intelligence to control continental Europe. See above. Satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained Young Italy terrorist and British agent Giuseppe Satanic psychopathic Mazzini, the British aristocrat David Urquhart, founder of modern communism, and Palmerston's French catamite, Emperor Napoleon III. Also leading British agent Karl Marx and their controller, head of British intelligence, satanic psychopathic Jeremy Bentham. That started the Great Revolutionary Year of 1848, and in the course of that year, every government in Europe was toppled, and every monarchy badly shaken, at least for a time. Metternich of Austria and King Louis Philippe of France fled to London, where they now spend their time playing cards. There was war in Italy, civil war in Austria, barricades in Paris, and tumult in Germany. The only exception to the rule was Russia, and now Lord Palmerston is preparing to invade Russia, with the help of his strategic catamite, Napoleon III, also known as Napoleon Le Petit. That will start in about 3 years, and it will be called the Crimean War. As soon as the war against Russia is over, Palmerston and John Stuart Mill at the British East India Company will satanically and psychopathically start the Great Mutiny in India, which some historians will call the Sepoy Rebellion. Muslim soldiers will be told that new cartridges are greased with pig fat, Hindu soldiers will be told the cartridges are greased with cow fat, and the result will be what you would expect. But in the conflagration the British will murder the Great Mughal and the Mughal Empire, and impose their direct rule in all of India. Typical John Stuart Mill. He, of course, is the author of On Liberty. The British would like to give China the same treatment they are giving India. Since 1842, Palmerston and the East India Company have been waging opium wars against the Chinese Empire. Assassinated Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal economics when he demanded that the Rothschild privately owned Federal Reserve create trillions of dollars of credit to build the infrastructure which made the people of America the richest population in the world for 60 years. Following the techniques of FDR shows the way out of the purposeful oligarch austerity depression designed to dumb down humanity, create universal poverty and rule the world. Assassinated John F. Kennedy made government created greenbacks too. By 1980 he planned to have fusion power online and nuclear rockets for Mars and all the necessary commodities available from the asteroid belt. His plan was for more water, irrigation infrastructure to triple the agriculture of the United States and throughout the world for increased richness, cheaper power, a more richer, more numerous, more evolved humanity. Ban Fed TARP to banks, get rid of derivatives, use Fed credit to create trillions to rebuild world and U.S. infrastructure, increase high-flux density energy production, industry, and agriculture, the program to end the economic depression and thus help in the worldwide evolution of a rich humanity. We must understand that any money paid to politicians is a bribe. Like judges, they must only be able to take money and advertising from their employers, all the people. We must understand that media cannot be under the total control of only 5 international companies. Politicians must only work to enrich their employers, all the people. Water, food, housing, education, libraries, energy, no pollution. All free and paid for by dirigist policies which make society rich and take humanity to the stars. A return to Palmerston. Lord Palmerston's 3 leading satanic psychopathic British agents who enabled British intelligence to control continental Europe. See above. Satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained Young Italy terrorist and British agent Giuseppe Satanic psychopathic Mazzini, the British aristocrat David Urquhart, founder of modern communism, and Palmerston's French catamite, Emperor Napoleon III. Also leading British agent Karl Marx and their controller, head of British intelligence, satanic psychopathic Jeremy Bentham. That started the Great Revolutionary Year of 1848, and in the course of that year, every government in Europe was toppled, and every monarchy badly shaken, at least for a time. Metternich of Austria and King Louis Philippe of France fled to London, where they now spend their time playing cards. There was war in Italy, civil war in Austria, barricades in Paris, and tumult in Germany. The only exception to the rule was Russia, and now Lord Palmerston is preparing to invade Russia, with the help of his strategic catamite, Napoleon III, also known as Napoleon Le Petit. That will start in about 3 years, and it will be called the Crimean War. As soon as the war against Russia is over, Palmerston and John Stuart Mill at the British East India Company will satanically and psychopathically start the Great Mutiny in India, which some historians will call the Sepoy Rebellion. Muslim soldiers will be told that new cartridges are greased with pig fat, Hindu soldiers will be told the cartridges are greased with cow fat, and the result will be what you would expect. But in the conflagration the British will murder the Great Mughal and the Mughal Empire, and impose their direct rule in all of India. Typical John Stuart Mill. He, of course, is the author of on liberty. The British would like to give China the same treatment they are giving India. Since 1842, Palmerston and the East India Company have been waging opium wars against the Chinese Empire. Partly to get them to open their ports to opium from India, and also as a way to conquer China. Already the British have Hong Kong and the other treaty ports. By 1860, the British will be in Beijing, looting and burning the summer palace of the emperor. Shortly after that, the British will back Napoleon in his project of putting a Habsburg Archduke on the throne of an ephemeral Mexican empire, the Maximilian Project. These projects will be closely coordinated with Palmerston's plans to eliminate the only two nations still able to oppose him, the Russia of Alexander II and the United States of Abraham Lincoln. Lord Palmerston will be the evil demiurge, creating the American Civil War, the mastermind of secession, far more important for the Confederacy than Jefferson Davis or Robert E. Lee. And in the midst of that war, Palmerston will detonate a rebellion in Poland against Russian rule, not for the sake of Poland, but for the sake of starting a general European war against Russia. But when the Russian fleets sail into New York and San Francisco, when Lee's wave breaks at Gettysburg, when the stars and bars are lowered over Vicksburg, the British Empire will be stopped just short of its goal. Just short, and yet, British hegemony will still be great enough to launch the two world wars of the 20th century, and the third conflagration that will start in 1991. And as we look forward for a century and a half from 1850, British geopolitics, despite the challenges, despite the defeats, despite the putrefaction of Britain itself, will remain the dominant factor in world affairs. The three satanic psychopathic British agents' personal relations epitomize the continual, infantile violence among the inmates in Palmerston's satanic psychopathic terrorist zoo. Palmerston's three satanic psychopathic British agents. How do the British do it? How can a clique of depraved aristocrats on this tight little island bid to rule the entire world? Don't believe the stories about the workshop of the world. There are some factories here, but Britain lives by looting the colonies. The fleet is formidable, but also overrated, and very vulnerable to serious challenges. The army is third-rate. But the British have inherited ancient knowledge from the Venetians that the greatest force in history is the force of ideas, and that if you can control the culture through the media, then you can control the way people think, and then statesmen and fleets and armies will bend to your will. Take our friend Lord Palmerston. Pam has the Foreign Office, the Home Office, and Whitehall, but when he needed to start the 1848 revolutions, or when the time will come for the American Civil War, he turns to a troika of agents. They are Lord Palmerston's three satanic psychopathic British agents. These three satanic psychopathic British agents are named Giuseppe Mazzini, Louis Napoleon Bonaparte III, and David Urquhart. These three satanic psychopathic British agents, far more than the Union Jack, Victoria, the Bulldog breed, the thin grey line of heroes, and the fleet, are the heart of what is called the British Empire. We will get to know satanic psychopathic Lord Palmerston's three satanic psychopathic British agents better. But first, one thing must be understood. They often had to work together on this or that project. But their relations were never exactly placid. You understand, their stock in trade was violence. So do not be surprised if we find Palmerston's three satanic psychopathic British agents pretending, for show, to lash out with slanders, knives, and bombs against each other, and even against their august master, Lord Palmerston himself. The main aim of Britain is destabilization, war, destruction of infrastructure, poverty, a lack of ability to defend against takeover. Under Lord Palmerston, England supports all revolutions, except her own, and the leading revolutionary in Her Majesty's Secret Service is Giuseppe Mazzini, our first satanic psychopathic British agent. Satanic psychopathic Mazzini's terrorist revolution. Satanic psychopathic Mazzini has concocted a very effective terrorist belief structure. Satanic psychopathic Mazzini is a genuine admirer of the diabolical Venetian secret agent, Venetian friar Paolo Serpi. Satanic psychopathic Mazzini's father was a physician to Queen Victoria's father. For a while satanic psychopathic Mazzini worked for the Carbonari, one of Napoleon's Freemasonic fronts. Then, in 1831, satanic psychopathic Mazzini founded his satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained Young Italy secret society. Louis Napoleon Bonaparte, today's President of France, sent him articles for his magazine. Satanic psychopathic Mazzini's cry is nationalistic. God and the people, Dio Popolo, which means that the people are the new God. Populism becomes an ersatz religion. Satanic psychopathic Mazzini teaches that Christianity developed the human individual, but that the era of Christianity, of freedom, of human rights, is now over. From now on, the protagonists of history are not individuals anymore, but peoples, understood as racial nationalities. Satanic psychopathic Mazzini is adamant that there are no inalienable human rights. There is only duty, the duty of thought and action to serve the destiny of the racial collectivities to fight against each other. Liberty, says satanic psychopathic Mazzini, is not the negation of all authority, it is the negation of every authority that fails to represent the collective aim of the nation. There is no individual human soul, only a collective soul. According to satanic psychopathic Mazzini, the Catholic Church, the papacy, and every other institution which attempts to bring God to man must be abolished. Every national grouping that can be identified must be given independence and self-determination in a centralized dictatorship. They must fight each other. In the coming century, Hitler, Mussolini, and the Italian fascists will repeat many of satanic psychopathic Mazzini's ideas verbatim. Satanic psychopathic Mazzini thinks that each modern nation has a mission. The British would take care of industry and colonies, the Poles, leadership of the Slavic world, the Russians, the civilizing of Asia. The French get action, the Germans get thought, and so forth. For some strange reason, there is no mission for Ireland, so satanic psychopathic Mazzini does not support the independence of Ireland. There is only one monarchy which satanic psychopathic Mazzini supports, because he says it has deep roots among the people, you guessed it, Queen Victoria. Satanic psychopathic Mazzini preaches an Italian revolution for the Third Rome. After the Rome of the Caesars and the Rome of the popes comes the Rome of the people. For this, the pope must be driven out. Satanic psychopathic Mazzini has tried to put this into practice just last year. In November 1848, armed satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained Young Italy gangs forced Pope Pius IX to flee from Rome to Naples. From March to June of 1849, satanic psychopathic Mazzini ruled the Papal States as one of 3 dictators, all Grand Orient Freemasons. During that time, death squads operated in Rome, Ancona, and other cities killing the intelligent good people in a call. Some churches were sacked, and many confessionals were burned. For Easter 1849, satanic psychopathic Mazzini staged a monstrous mock Eucharist in the Vatican he called the Novum Pascha, featuring himself, God, and the people. During this time he was planning to set up his own Italian national church on the Anglican model. The defense of Rome was organized by Giuseppe Garibaldi, who had joined satanic psychopathic Mazzini's satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained Young Italy in the early 1830s. But a French army sent by fellow satanic psychopathic British agent Louis Napoleon III drove out satanic psychopathic Mazzini, Garibaldi, and their supporters. Satanic psychopathic Lord Palmerston said that satanic psychopathic Mazzini's regime in Rome was far better than any the Romans have had for centuries. Right now satanic psychopathic Mazzini is here in London, enjoying the support of Lord Ashley, the Earl of Shaftesbury, a Protestant fanatic who also happens to be Lord Palmerston's son-in-law. Satanic psychopathic Mazzini's direct access to the British government payroll comes through James Stansfeld, a junior Lord of the Admiralty and a very high official of British intelligence. Last year, Stansfeld provided the money for satanic psychopathic Mazzini's Roman Republic. Lord Stansfeld's father-in-law, William Henry Ashurst, is another of satanic psychopathic Mazzini's patrons, as is John Bowring of the Foreign Office, the man who will provoke the Second Opium War against China using the normal satanic device of targeting countries for destruction with drugs. Bowring is Jeremy Bentham's literary executor. John Stuart Mill of India House is another of satanic psychopathic Mazzini's friends. Satanic psychopathic Mazzini is close to the proto-fascist writer Thomas Carlyle, and has been having an affair with Carlyle's wife. All incestuous relationships. One of Metternich's henchmen has said that Palmerston's policy is to make Italy turbulent, which is bad for Austria, without making her powerful, which would harm England. Satanic psychopathic Mazzini's role in Italy has been that of a marplot, a wrecker, a terrorist, an assassin. His specialty is the normal device sending brainwashed assassins to their deaths in terrorist attacks. He hides out and always succeeds in saving himself. Satanic psychopathic Mazzini travels readily on the continent using false passports, posing as an American, an Englishman, a rabbi. In the 30s and 40s, satanic psychopathic Mazzini was targeting Piedmont in the north, and the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies in the south. In 1848, he rushed to Milan as soon as the Austrians had been driven out and tried to start trouble. One of satanic psychopathic Mazzini's agents, General Ramorino, let the Austrian commander Radetzky outflank the Piedmontese and win the Battle of Novara. Ramorino was executed for treason, but Piedmont had lost the First War for Italian liberation. The king abdicated, and satanic psychopathic Mazzini tried to break up Piedmont with a revolt in Genoa. 3 years from now, satanic psychopathic Mazzini will stage an abortive revolt against the Austrians in Milan, mainly to stop Russia from allying with Austria in the Crimean War. A few years after that, satanic psychopathic Mazzini will try another insurrection in Genova, still trying to break up Piedmont. In 1860, he will encourage Garibaldi to sail to Sicily, and then try to provoke a civil war between Garibaldi's dictatorship in the south and Cavour's Piedmontese government in the north. In 1860, he will be thrown out of Naples as an agent provocateur. By that time, satanic psychopathic Mazzini will be a hated and reviled figure, but British propaganda and British support will keep him going. Satanic psychopathic Mazzini is also an assassination bureau. In 1848, there was a chance that Pius IX's very capable reforming minister Pellegrino Rossi could unify Italy and solve the Roman question in a constructive way, through an Italian confederation, chaired by the Pope, arranged with Gioberti, Cavour, and other Piedmontese. Satanic psychopathic Mazzini's agents, members of satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained Young Italy, stabbed Pellegrino Rossi to death. The killer was in touch with Lord Minto, Palmerston's special envoy for Italy. Violence between satanic psychopathic Mazzini and Napoleon III is always intense, especially after Napoleon's army finished off satanic psychopathic Mazzini's Roman Republic. But the reality is the satanic psychopathic aim of the principle of poverty created by destabilization, terrorism, war, famine, and the destruction of infrastructure, in order to maintain satanic psychopathic rule. In 1855, a satanic psychopathic Mazzini agent named Giovanni Pianeri will attempt to kill Napoleon III, and a French court will convict satanic psychopathic Mazzini. Have Napoleon's forces outshone the bungling British in the Crimea? Are the British nervous about Napoleon's new ironclad battleship, when they have none? Attempts to kill Napoleon are financed by the Tibaldi Fund, run by satanic psychopathic Mazzini and set up by Sir James Stansfeld of the Admiralty. Later, in February 1858, there will be an attempt to blow up Napoleon by one of satanic psychopathic Mazzini's closest and best-known lieutenants from the Roman Republic, Felice Orsini. Napoleon will get the message that it is time to get busy and start a war against Austria in 1859. At other times, satanic psychopathic Mazzini tried to kill King Carlo Alberto of Piedmont. Satanic psychopathic Mazzini's satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained Young Italy is always the party of the dagger, of the stiletto. In the hands of Judith, the sword which cut short the life of Holofernes was holy. Holy was the Louis Kossuth, leader of the Hungarian side of Palmerston's 1848-49 effort to forcibly retire the Austro-Hungarian Empire as one of Europe's policemen. Holy was the dagger which Harmodius crowned with roses, holy was the dagger of Brutus, holy the poniard of the Sicilian who began the Vespers, holy the arrow of Tell. Vintage satanic psychopathic Mazzini. London's future ability to assassinate men like Walter Rathena, Giorgio Ponto, Aldo Moro, Alfred Herrhausen, Ditlev Rohwedder, stretches back in unbroken continuity to the satanic psychopathic Mazzini networks of today. Satanic psychopathic Mazzini is actually doing everything he can to prevent Italian unity. When unity comes, 20 years from now, it will come in the form of a highly centralized state dominated by Grand Orient Freemasons. For 30 years the prime ministers will be satanic psychopathic Mazzini's agents, like Depretis and Crispy. Because of the violent liquidation of the Papal States, the Catholics will refuse to take part in politics. Italy will remain weak, poor, and divided. After Mussolini, the Italian Republican Party will identify with satanic psychopathic Mazzini, and Ugo La Malfa and his friends will continue satanic psychopathic Mazzini's efforts to make sure that Italy is weak and divided, bringing down one government after another, and ruining the economy. The ethnic terrorists of satanic psychopathic Mazzini's zoo. Satanic psychopathic Mazzini's work for the British extends far beyond Italy. Like the Foreign Office and the Admiralty which he serves, satanic psychopathic Mazzini encompasses the world. The satanic psychopathic Mazzini terrorist networks offer us a fascinating array of movements and personalities. There are agents and dupes, professional killers, fellow travelers, and criminal energy types. Satanic psychopathic Mazzini's Court of Miracles was a public scandal. Leopold of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, now the future King of Belgium, has been complaining to his niece Queen Victoria that in London there is maintained a sort of menagerie of terrorists, Kossuths, satanic psychopathic Mazzinis, Lagranges, Ledru-Rollins, etc. to let loose occasionally on the continent to render its quiet and prosperity impossible. Again, the reality is the satanic psychopathic aim of the principle of poverty created by destabilization, terrorism, war, famine, and the destruction of infrastructure, in order to maintain satanic psychopathic rule. Indeed, on February 21, 1854, this satanic psychopathic terrorist crew will come together at the home of the American consul, George Sanders, satanic psychopathic Mazzini, Felice Orsini, Garibaldi, Louis Kossuth, Arnold Ruga, Ledru-Rollin, Stanley Wursell, Alexander Herzen, and U.S. trader and future President James Buchanan. There will also be a Peabody from the counting house. We can think of satanic psychopathic British agent Mazzini as the satanic psychopathic terrorist zookeeper of a universal human satanic psychopathic terrorist zoo of paid terrorists. Satanic psychopathic Mazzini's human satanic psychopathic terrorist zoo is divided into theme parks or pavilions, one for each ethnic group. In a normal satanic psychopathic terrorist zoo there is an elephant house, a monkey house, an alligator pond, and the like. In satanic psychopathic Mazzini's human satanic psychopathic terrorist zoo there is an Italian house, a Russian house, a Hungarian house, a Polish house, an American house, all British paid and maintained. Let us walk through the various theme parks in the satanic psychopathic terrorist zoo and identify some of the specimens. Satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained Young Italy, as we have seen, was founded in 1831, attracting the satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained young sailor Giuseppe Garibaldi and Louis Napoleon III. Shortly thereafter there followed satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained Young Poland, whose leaders included the revolutionaries Lelewel and Wursell. Then came satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained Young Germany, featuring Arnold Ruga, who had published some material by an obscure German Red Republican, British paid and maintained Karl Marx. This is the satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained Young Germany satirized by Heinrich Heine. In 1834, satanic psychopathic Mazzini founded satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained Young Europe, with Italian, Swiss, German, and Polish components. Satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained Young Europe was billed as the Holy Alliance of the Peoples, opposed to Metternich's Holy Alliance of Despots. By 1835, there was also a satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained Young Switzerland. In that same year satanic psychopathic Mazzini launched satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained Young France. The guiding light here was Ledru-Rollin, who later became the interior minister in Lamartine's short-lived Second French Republic of 1848. The British Empire Committee of 300 Worldwide Drug Trade. There was also satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained Young Corsica, which was the mafia who became distributors of the British Oligarch Committee of 300. Consisting English lords and mafia, Jardine Matheson, Russell, Bronfman, Kennedy, Bush, etc., a worldwide $1 trillion per year business laundered by HSBC, the Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank set up by the British Empire specifically for the purpose, and opium and later heroin. Transported by clippers from India to China and later by the CIA and NATO from the Golden Triangle between Thailand, Burma, and Laos and into Europe via Sicily and the Prince Rainier and Grace Kelly ancient House of Grimaldi's Monaco, the French Connection, by the CIA and NATO, and also from Afghanistan into Russia, all for profit and for the dumbing down, destabilization and destruction of humanity. By the end of this century we will have a satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained young Argentina, founded by Garibaldi, satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained young Bosnia, satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained young India, satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained young Russia, satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained young Armenia, satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained young Egypt, the satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained young Czechs, plus similar groupings in Romania, Hungary, Bulgaria, and Greece. Satanic psychopathic Mazzini is especially interested in creating a South Slavic federation dominated by Belgrade, and for that reason, he has a Serbian organization. That will have to wait for satanic psychopathic Mazzini's student Woodrow Wilson and the Versailles Peace Conference of 1919. Right now, a Masonic group in the United States is gearing up to support the pro-slavery doughface Franklin Pierce for president in 1852. They are the radical wing of the Democratic Party, and they are satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained young America. In the future there will be the satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained young Turks to remove the Ottoman Empire. And yes, there is also a Palmerston satanic psychopathic Mazzini group for Jews, sometimes called satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained young Israel, and sometimes called B'nai B'rith. Worldwide divide and conquer. For satanic psychopathic Mazzini, a British think tank has decreed that divide and conquer means nationalism. Nationality means a race, la raza, a fixed array of behavior like a breed of dog or a species of animal. He is not thinking of a national community united by a literate language and a classical culture to which any person can become assimilated through a political choice. For satanic psychopathic British agent Mazzini, the terrorist race is divide and conquer, unchangeable, and race is destiny, race is fighting every other race. It is a matter of blood and soil. Cats fight dogs, La Raza Mexicans and South Americans fight gringos, French fight Germans, Germans fight Poles, and so on through all eternity. For satanic psychopathic British agent Mazzini, the divide and conquer terrorist, is anarchist white Russian, communist, capitalist, color revolution, bohemian, hippie, enmities inflamed to keep everyone fighting through all eternity. For satanic psychopathic British agent Mazzini, divide and conquer, is Luciferian, Satanist, Zionist, Abrahamist, Catholic, Jesuit, Evangelist, Jihadist Salafists, Wahhabists, Muslim Brotherhood, Taoist, Boxer, Buddhist enmities inflamed to keep everyone fighting through all eternity. For satanic psychopathic British agent Mazzini, divide and conquer, is gang-related Bloods, Crips, Rebloodlican, Demo-Crips, Tory, Whig, Labour, Grimaldi French Mafia, Italian Godfather Mafia, Kennedy Irish Mafia, Bronfman Zionist Mafia, Chinese Boxer, and Tong, Japanese Yakuza, enmities inflamed to keep everyone fighting and under control through all eternity. These hatreds are to be inflamed for the satanic psychopathic aim of the principle of poverty created by destabilization, terrorism, war, famine, and the destruction of infrastructure, in order to maintain satanic psychopathic rule, civilization, and humanity crushed between the grinding wheels of nationalist, religionalist, politicalist, terrorists. Young nationalism. Each of satanic psychopathic Mazzini's organizations demands immediate national liberation for its own ethnic group on the basis of aggressive chauvinism and expansionism. Satanic psychopathic Mazzini's warhorse is the territorial Nazi Lebensraum imperative. Each is obsessed with borders and territory, and each finds a way to oppose and sabotage rich dirigist expansionist economic development and works to destroy the infrastructure which only can produce richness. Each one is eager to submerge and repress other national groupings in pursuit of its own mystical destiny. This is satanic psychopathic Mazzini's racist gospel of universal ethnic cleansing. We have seen some Italian cages, next comes the Hungarian terrorist theme park in the satanic psychopathic terrorist zoo. Our principal specimen here is British paid and maintained Louis Kossuth, a leader of the Hungarian Revolution of 184,849. Kossuth was for free trade. He wanted equal status for Hungarians in the Austrian Empire, equal with the Austrians. But within the Hungarian part of the Habsburg Empire there were many other national groups: Poles, Ukrainians, Germans, Serbs, Romanians, Croatians, and others. Would they receive political and linguistic autonomy? Kossuth's answer was to ban all official use of the Slavic and Romanian languages in favor of Hungarian. Kossuth was therefore on course for a bloody collision with the Illyrian movement for Greater Croatia, and with the military forces of the Croatian leader Jelačić. There was also conflict with the Serbs. Satanic psychopathic Mazzini had promised the same territories to Hungary, to the Illyrian Croatians, and to his Serbian South Slav entity. Then there was the question of Transylvania, claimed by the Hungarians but also by the satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained Young Romania of Dimitri Golescu, another satanic psychopathic Mazzini agent. Satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained Young Romania's program was to restore the kingdom of Dacia as it had existed before the Roman Emperor Trajan. So satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained Young Hungary and satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained Young Romania were pre-programmed to fight to the death over Transylvania, which they did, last year. Because of the ceaseless strife of Hungarians and Croatians, Hungarians and Serbians, Hungarians and Romanians, it proved possible for the Habsburgs to save their police state with the help of a Russian army. The ethnic theme houses of the satanic psychopathic terrorist zoo thus sally forth to fight, not only Habsburgs and Romanovs, but most of all, each other. We will find the same thing in viewing the Polish and Russian pavilions. All these hatreds are to be inflamed for the satanic psychopathic aim of the principle of poverty created by destabilization, terrorism, war, famine, and the destruction of infrastructure, in order to maintain satanic psychopathic rule. The satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained Young Poland of Lelewel and Wurzel demands the recreation of the Polish state and rollback of the 1772-95 partitions of Poland. But they go much further, laying claim to Poland in its old Jagiellonian borders, stretching from the shores of the Baltic to the shores of the Black Sea. This includes an explicit denial that any Ukrainian nation 41 exists. In the orbit of satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained Young Poland is the poet Adam Mickiewicz, a close friend of satanic psychopathic Mazzini who was with him last year during the Roman Republic. Mickiewicz argues that Poland is special because it has suffered more than any other nation. Poland is the Christ among nations. Mickiewicz dreams of uniting all the West and South Slavs against the tyrant of the North, the barbarians of the North. By this he means Russia, the main target. Satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained Young Poland's program also foreshadows the obvious conflict with satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained Young Germany over Silesia. Satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained Young Russia means the anarchist Mikhail Bakunin and the aristocratic ideologue Alexander Herzen. Herzen is an agent of British Empire Baron James Rothschild of Paris. Right after the Crimean War, Herzen will start publishing the Polar Star and the Bell, both leak sheets for British secret intelligence that will build up their readership by divulging Russian state secrets. Herzen's obvious target is Tsar Alexander II, the ally of Lincoln. Herzen prints the ravings of Bakunin, who preaches panslavism, meaning that Russia will take over all the other Slavic nations. Out of an ocean of blood and fire there will rise in Moscow high in the sky the star of the revolution to become the guide of liberated mankind. Vintage Bakunin. If satanic psychopathic Mazzini relies on the stiletto, for his agent Bakunin it is the peasant's axe that will bring down the German regime in St. Petersburg. Herzen is interested in sabotaging Alexander II and his policy of real, anti-British reform in Russia. To block real industrial capitalist development, he preaches reliance on the aboriginal Slavic village, the mir, or communist communalism. With communal ownership of the land plus the ancient Slavic workshop, the artel. The mir will never build the Trans-Siberian Railway or a rich high-flux density economy. Herzen sees Russia as the center of crystallization for the entire Slavic world. Herzen, although he is usually called a Westernizer, is totally hostile to Western civilization. He writes of the need for a new Attila, perhaps Russian, perhaps American, perhaps both, who will be able to tear down the old Europe. In the moment when the British will seem so close to winning everything, Herzen will support Palmerston's Polish insurrection of 1863, and will lose most of his readers. Once the American Civil War is over, the British will have little use for Herzen. By then, London will be betting on the nihilist terrorists of the Narodnaya Volya, People's Will, who will finally assassinate Alexander II, plus the Russian legal Marxists, all British agents. But already today we can see the conflicts ahead between satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained young Poland and satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained young Russia. In the conflicts among satanic psychopathic Mazzini's national chauvinist operations, we can see the roots of the slaughter of World War I. Now, let us view the cages in the American theme park in satanic psychopathic Mazzini's human satanic psychopathic terrorist zoo. This is satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained young America. The name was popularized in 1845 by Edwin de Leon, the son of a Scottish Rite, Jewish slave trading family of Charleston, South Carolina. Edwin de Leon will later be one of the leaders of the Confederate espionage organization in Europe. The leader of satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained young America is George N. Sanders, the future editor of the Democratic Review. Satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained young America's view of manifest destiny is a slave empire in Mexico, La Raza and the Caribbean. In the 1852 election, satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained young America will back Karl Marx, who wrote Das Kapital under British agent David Urquhart's guiding influence. The dark horse doe-faced Democrat, Franklin Pierce, against the patriot Winfield Scott. Scott's Whig Party will be destroyed. Satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained young America operatives will receive important posts in London, Madrid, Turin, and other European capitals. Here they will support satanic psychopathic Mazzini and his gang. Satanic psychopathic Mazzini's American contacts are either proto-Confederates or strict abolitionists, such as William Lloyd Garrison. During the American Civil War, satanic psychopathic Mazzini will favor both the abolition of slavery and the destruction of the Union through secessionism, the London Line. This subversion will be showcased during the famous tour of satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained Kossuth in the United States next year and the year after. Kossuth will be accompanied by satanic psychopathic Mazzini's moneybags, the Tuscan Freemason Adriano Lemmi. On the eve of the Crimean War, with Palmerston doing everything to isolate Russia, Kossuth's line will be that the tree of evil and despotism in Europe is Russia. Kossuth will try to blame even the problems of Italy on Russia. Despite Kossuth's efforts, the United States will emerge as the only power friendly to Russia during the Crimean conflict. Kossuth will call for the United States to join with England and France in war against Russia, Lord Palmerston's dream scenario. Satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained Kossuth will refuse to call for the abolition of slavery. Satanic psychopathic British paid and maintained Kossuth will get on well with the slaveholders, since he will also be attempting to mediate a U.S. seizure of Cuba, which meshes perfectly with the secessionist program. The second satanic psychopathic British agent, David Urquhart satanic psychopathic Mazzini is the satanic psychopathic terrorist zookeeper for all of these theme parks. But there are other satanic psychopathic terrorist zookeepers, and still more theme parks in the human, multicultural satanic psychopathic terrorist zoo. The custodians are Palmerston's two other satanic psychopathic British agents, David Urquhart and Napoleon III. There is also a theme park for the English lower orders. The keeper here is the strange and eccentric Scot, David Urquhart, the most aristocratic of Palmerston's satanic psychopathic British agents. Urquhart was chosen for his work directly by head of British intelligence, Jeremy Bentham, who lavishly praised our David in his letters. Urquhart took part in Lord Byron's Greek Revolution, but then was sent to destabilize the Ottoman Empire and found he liked Turks better after all. He secured a post at the British Embassy in Constantinople and went native, becoming an Ottoman pasha in his lifestyle. Urquhart's positive contribution to civilization was his popularization of the Turkish bath. He also kept a harem for some time. Urquhart also thought that late Ottoman feudalism was a model of what civilization ought to be. In Turkey, Urquhart became convinced that all the evil in the world had a single root, Russia, the machinations of the court of St. Petersburg. A very convenient view for Palmerston's Britain, which was always on the verge of war with Russia. For Urquhart, his secret agent cover is that the unification of Italy is a Russian plot. He once met Mazzini, and concluded after 10 minutes that satanic psychopathic Mazzini was a Russian agent. Urquhart's secret agent cover was as a Russophobe, therefore he said but never meant, the problem of Great Britain is that Palmerston is a Russian agent, having been recruited by one of his many mistresses, the Russian Countess Levin. During the years of Chartist agitation, Urquhart bought up working union labor leaders and drilled them in the litany that all of the problems of the English working man came from Russia via Lord Palmerston. To these workers Urquhart teaches something he calls dialectics and communism created by his agent, divide and conquer Marx. Urquhart will be a member of Parliament and he controls a weekly paper, the Free Press. Palmerston understands that his subversive methods will always generate opposition from the Tory gentry and the straight-laced crowd. So he has taken the precaution of institutionalizing that opposition under his own control, with a raving megalomaniac communist leader, Urquhart, under cover, to discredit it. Urquhart's demonization of Russia foreshadows something that will be called communism in Russia in 50 years and McCarthyism in the USA a century from now. Urquhart's secret agent cover remedy is to go back to the simplicity of character of Merry England, in the sense of retrogression to bucolic medieval myth. The people of England were better clothed and fed when there was no commerce and when there were no factories. That is vintage Urquhart. Communalism has always created poverty and it will never build a rich high-flux density economy. Does this talk of pre-capitalist economic formations strike a familiar chord? Urquhart, through British agent Karl Marx, is the father of communism and communalism as a strategy for the satanic psychopathic aim of the principle of poverty created by destabilization, terrorism, war, famine, and the destruction of infrastructure, and in this case propaganda created by British agent Karl Marx, in order to maintain satanic psychopathic rule. How interesting that Urquhart should be the controller of British agent Karl Marx, who earns his keep as a writer for Urquhart's paper. British agent Karl Marx was given an office in the British National Library in London. David Urquhart is the founder of modern communism. It is Urquhart who will prescribe the plan for Das Kapital. Marx is a sad admirer of Urquhart, acknowledging his influence more than that of any other living person. Marx will even compose a life of Lord Palmerston, based on undercover agent Urquhart's wild obsession that Pam is a Russian agent of influence. This says enough about Marx's acumen as a political analyst. Marx and Urquhart agree that there is no real absolute profit in capitalism, and that technological progress causes a falling rate of profit. Another of Urquhart's operatives is Lothar Bischer, a confidant of the German labor leader Lassalle, and later of the Iron Chancellor, Otto von Bismarck himself. After Gettysburg, Urquhart will move to France, and open a terrorist Jesuit theme park for right-wing Catholics. He will meet Pius IX and will join members of Cardinal Newman's Oxford movement at the First Vatican Council in 1870. The third satanic psychopathic British agent, Napoleon III. Of course the Rothschilds were financing both Napoleon I and the British, just as they funded both Hitler and Roosevelt. Our third paid British agent is the current president and soon-to-be Emperor of France, Napoleon III. Napoleon I. Petit. As we have seen, he started off as a carbonaro and terrorist in contact with satanic psychopathic Mazzini. In 1836, Napoleon tried to parlay his famous name into a successful putsch. He failed and was exiled to America. Then Napoleon was given a private study at the New British Museum reading room and frequented Lord Palmerston. He began work on his book, Les Idées Napoléoniques. His main idea was that the original Napoleon was not wrong to be an imperialist, but only erred in trying to expand his empire at the expense of Great Britain. There is plenty of room for a French empire as a junior partner to the British. The preferred form of government would be democratic Caesarism, with frequent plebiscites. In 1848 Napoleon was working for the British as a special constable, a riot cop, to put down an expected Chartist revolution. He was then shipped to Paris. There Napoleon III used his name to become president, and then organized a British-funded coup d'état that made him emperor. Palmerston quickly endorsed the coup, causing hysteria on the part of the Victoria and Albert Palace clique. Palmerston was forced out, but he was soon back, stronger than ever. After hundreds of years of warfare, France at last had been broken, placed under a more or less dependable British puppet regime. The Western powers, the Anglo-French, were born. Napoleon III gave Palmerston one indispensable ingredient for his imperial strategy, a powerful land army. Soon an open Anglo-French entente was in full swing. When Victoria came to Paris, it was the first such visit by an English sovereign since Henry VI had been crowned King of France in Notre Dame in 1431. When Napoleon joined Palmerston in attacking Russia in the Crimea, it was the first war in 400 years to see France and England on the same side. The French pavilion of the satanic psychopathic terrorist zoo is being redecorated with a new version of British empiricism. This is positivism, the miserable propaganda, the satanic outlook of Auguste Comte and Ernest Renan. This will lead to the French structuralists, ethnologists, and even deconstructionists of the late 20th century. Napoleon III is Palmerston's strategic catamite, usually with as much will of his own as an inflatable sex doll. Think of him as a blow-up British agent. After the Crimea, Palmerston will need a land war against Austria in northern Italy. Napoleon, egged on by Camillo Benso de Cavour, who knows how to play the interstices, will oblige with the War of 1859 and the Great Battle of Solferino. When the time will come for Maximilian's Mexican adventure, Napoleon will be eager to send a fleet and an army. During the American Civil War, Napoleon's pro-Confederate stance will be even more aggressive than Palmerston's own. In 1870, Bismarck will defeat Napoleon and send him into exile in England. Here Napoleon will plan a comeback after the Paris Commune, but he will need to be seen on horseback, and he has a bladder ailment. The bladder operation designed to make him a man on horseback once again will instead kill him. Napoleon III calls himself a socialist and will style the latter phase of his regime the Liberal Empire. That means all of France as a theme park in the British satanic psychopathic terrorist zoo. In 1860 Napoleon will sign a free trade treaty with the British. Along the way, he will pick up a junior partner colonial empire in Senegal and in Indochina in 1862. Something that will set the stage for the Vietnam War a century later. Under Napoleon, France will build the Suez Canal, only to have it fall under the control of the British. Napoleon III will furnish the prototype for the fascist dictators of the 20th century. After his defeat in the Franco-Prussian War, he will bequeath to France a party of proto-fascist colonialists and revanchists beating the drum for Alsace-Lorraine, which Napoleon will lose to Bismarck. These revanchists will turn up again in fascist Nazi Vichy with the help of Hitler, the Fourth Republic, and the French Socialist Party of today. And so it will come to pass that Lord Palmerston will attempt to rule the world through the agency of a triumvirate of satanic psychopathic British agents, each one the warden of some pavilions of a human satanic psychopathic terrorist zoo. The reason why must now be confronted. The satanic psychopathic ideology of British imperialism in a line with satanic psychopathic Babylon, satanic psychopathic Roman Empire, satanic psychopathic Venice, satanic psychopathic British Empire, satanic psychopathic Anglo-American establishment. The British Empire is the empire of the same satanic psychopathic bloodline families stretching back to satanic psychopathic Babylon, through the satanic psychopathic Roman Empire, through satanic psychopathic Venice, through to the satanic psychopathic British Empire of satanic psychopathic sense certainty, the empire of satanic psychopathic empiricism. It is the empire of British psychopathic philosophical radicalism, of utilitarianism, of satanic psychopath Bentham's hedonistic calculus, psychopathic existentialism, and pragmatism. Why are the British liberal imperialists called the Venetian Party? Well, for one thing, they call themselves the Venetian Party. The future Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli will write in his novel Coningsby that the Whig aristocrats of 1688 wanted to establish in England a high aristocratic republic on the model of Venice, making the kings into doges, and with a Venetian constitution. During the years after the Council of Florence in 1439, the Venetian enemies of Nicholas of Cusa plotted to wage war on the Italian High Renaissance and Cusa's ecumenical project. To combat CUSA's Renaissance Platonism, the Venetians of the Rialto and Padua turned to a new-look Aristotelianism, featuring Aristotle's characteristic outlook shorn of its medieval scholastic and Averroist outgrowths. This was expressed in the work at the University of Padua, where all elite Venetians sent their sons, extolling satanic psychopathic Aristotle of Pietro Pomponazzi, and in that of Pomponazzi's highly born Venetian pupil, Gasparo Contarini, later cardinal. During the War of the League of Cambrai of 1509–17, an alliance of virtually every power in Europe threatened to wipe out the Venetian oligarchy. The Venetians knew that France or Spain could crush them like so many flies. The Venetians responded by launching the Protestant Reformation with two paid Venetian agents, Luther and Calvin, and badly advised, by Venetian agents, syphilitic Henry VIII. At the same time, Cardinal Contarini created the Jesuits, soldiers of God, and gave them the ancient techniques of guided meditation mind control, which even today so strongly holds together the worldwide Jesuit organization of secret agents. The Jesuits made Babylonian secret agent Aristotle a central component of the Catholic Counter-Reformation and the Council of Trent, and put Dante and Piccolomini on the index of prohibited books. The result was a century and a half of wars of religion, and a little dark age, culminating in the great crisis of the 17th century. After the War of the League of Cambrai of 1509–17, satanic psychopathic, slave trading, drug smuggling, banker Venice was a cancer consciously planning its own metastasis. From their lagoon, the Venetians' families in the same line as satanic psychopathic Babylon and the satanic psychopathic slave trading Roman Empire chose to move from Venice to a swamp and an island facing the North Atlantic, Holland and the British Isles. To Holland and the British Isles, the hegemonic satanic psychopathic Venetian Giovanni party would relocate their family fortunes, their fondi, and their characteristic epistemology. France was also colonized, but the main bets were placed further north. First, Cardinal Contarini's relative and neighbor, Venetian agent Francesco Zorzi, was sent to serve as sex advisor to Henry VIII, whose raging libido would be the key to Venetian hopes. Satanic psychopathic Venetian agent Zorzi created Rosicrucian mysticism and Freemasonry in order to create destabilizing terrorist secret agents in a land that satanic psychopathic Venetian bankers had been looting for centuries. The Venetian party in England grew under the early Stuarts as satanic psychopathic Francis Bacon and his homosexual, the satanic psychopathic Venetian way of loving, wife Thomas Hobbes imported the neo-Aristotelianism of satanic psychopathic kingpin Venetian agent Fra Paolo Sarpi, the great Venetian game master of the early 1600s, the architect of the 30 Years' War. When James I and Charles I disappointed the satanic psychopathic Venetians in that 30 Years' War, Venetian agents Cromwell, Milton, and a menagerie of sectarians were brought to power in an all-Protestant civil war and commonwealth. This was the time of the Irish genocide and the foundation of the overseas slave empire in Jamaica. After the depravity of the Restoration, the Glorious Revolution of 1688 gave birth to the most perfect imitation of the satanic psychopathic Venetian oligarchical system ever created. The great Whig and Tory aristocrats set as their goal a new, world-encompassing Roman Empire with its center in London. After the defeat of Leibniz's attempt to save England, Great Britain set off on the path of empire with its new Hanoverian Guelph dynasty. The War of the Spanish Succession in 1702–13 was the first war fought on a world scale and the last gasp for rivals Spain and Holland. The Peace of Utrecht left the British supreme on the oceans. Louis XIV and Colbert were defeated by divide-and-conquer Venetian geopolitics, as satanic psychopathic Venetian British cash was used to hire states, mercenaries like Brandenburg, Hesse, and its mind-controlled Hessian troops, see Full Metal Jacket by Kubrick, and Savoy to fight the French, Americans etc. By winning the coveted Asiento, the monopoly on slave commerce with Spanish America, the British became the biggest slave merchants in the world. The wealth of Bristol and Liverpool would be built on slaves. After several decades of Walpole and the satanic psychopathic Hellfire clubs, there came the Great Napoleonic War of the mid-18th century, the Austrian succession followed by the 7 Years' War. This was the end of France as a naval power and worldwide rival for the British. William Pitt, Earl of Chatham, subsidized Frederick the Great of Prussia to win an empire on the plains of Germany. The British took Louisbourg and then seized Quebec City, driving the French out of Canada. The British became the paramount power in India. The British oligarchs of the day, like their successors after 1989, were convinced that they could turn wild, violating the laws of nature without penalty, for nothing now stood against them. But, in loading the American colonies with their prohibitions of settlement and manufacture, their Quebec Act, Stamp Acts, Townshend Acts, and Intolerable Acts, they set the stage for the American Revolution. In these years William Petty, Earl of Shelburne and Marquis of Lansdowne, gathered a stable of ideologues and operatives, his satanic psychopathic British agents working for the British East India Company. These were Satanic Agent Jeremy Bentham. Chorus: British empiricism started from Francis Bacon's inductive method based on Satanic sense certainty, there is no God, all of which was taken directly from such Venetians as Paul Peruta and Pietro Serpi. With Bacon is Thomas Hobbes, who wrote of human society as a war of all against all, necessarily dominated by a tyrannical Leviathan state. Then came John Locke, for whom the human mind was a blank slate destined to be filled by sense perceptions. Locke's hedonism led him to the conclusion that human freedom was an absurd contradiction in terms. Locke was followed by the solipsist George Berkeley, who denied any basis in reality to our sense impressions, they are a kind of videotape played in each one of our heads by some unknown supernatural agency. Perception was the only existence there was. Hen came the Scots lawyer and diplomat David Hume. For Hume also, there is really no human self, but merely a bundle of changing perceptions. In his Inquiry Concerning Human Understanding and other earlier works, Hume attacks the idea of cause and effect. For Hume, there is no necessary connection between a cause and an effect that the human mind can know with certainty, we only have a vague association or habit of thought that one phenomenon has been usually followed by another. But in these same earlier works, Hume had at least accepted the importance of filling the tabula rasa of each new human mind with a stock of received ideas of conduct which can be lumped under the heading of morals or custom, including religion. During Hume's later years, the power of the Shelburne faction became dominant in Britain, and Hume's skepticism became bolder and more radical. The later Hume, as in his dialogues concerning natural religion, totally repudiated the notion of custom and morality in favor of an unbridled hedonism that points toward the depths of pederasty and degradation inhabited by Jeremy Bentham. Immanuel Kant, during his long teaching career in Königsberg, Prussia, had been a retailer of Hume's ideas. The two liberals Kant and Hume had a broad common ground in their determination to eradicate the influence of Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. But when Hume repudiated all notion of custom and traditional morality, even Kant could not follow. Kant responded with the critique of pure reason to defend the notion of cause and effect as one of Aristotle's categories, against Hume, who had reached a sub-Aristotelian level. On this basis, Kant was able to defend customary ideas of religion and morality, das Sittengesetz. The Kant-Hume split illustrates why British liberal empiricism tends to be several degrees more rotten than its continental European counterparts. In October 1776, a 28-year-old English barrister named Jeremy Bentham wrote contemptuously of the American Declaration of Independence, which had been signed as an act of the Continental Congress on July 4 of that year. This, he spewed, they hold to be a truth self-evident. At the same time, to secure these rights they are satisfied that government should be instituted. They see not, that nothing that was ever called government ever was or ever could be exercised but at the expense of one or another of those rights, that, some one or other of those pretended unalienable rights is alienated. In these tenets they have outdone the extravagance of all former fanatics. Shortly after penning this venom, Bentham made his philosophical breach with the American Republicans all the more clear in a lengthy tract titled An Introduction to the Principles of Morals and Legislation, 1780. That manuscript would not only prescribe the founding principles of British philosophical radicalism, it would propel Bentham into the very center of a then emerging new British Foreign Office and British Foreign Intelligence Service, consolidated under the guiding hand of William Petty, Lord Shelburne, a man who at the time was the de facto, if not de jure Doge of Britain. Bentham categorically rejected any distinction between man and the lower beasts, defining man instead as a creature driven purely by hedonistic impulses. To wit, Nature has placed mankind under the governance of two sovereign masters, pain and pleasure. It is for them alone to point out what we ought to do, as well as to determine what we shall do. Every effort we make to throw off our subjection, will serve but to demonstrate and confirm it. The principle of utility, the greatest happiness or greatest felicity principle, recognizes this subjection, and assumes it for the foundation. Systems which attempt to question it deal, in caprice instead of reason, in darkness instead of light.